let's talk about specificity in the context of zone 2 training. So we're going to try and answer the question, is zone 2 specific to your sport? And I'll take different examples: endurance sports, team sports, strength sports, and hybrid sports like CrossFit or MMA. But before we can answer that question, is zone 2 specific to your sport, we need to define the term specific. And what I've noticed in recent times is that there seems to be two different ways to look at the term specificity. Some people talk about specificity as in the link or the likeness to your physical activity. So for example, is running specific to soccer? Yes, from a modality standpoint. Cycling would not be specific for soccer players because it would probably be more of a general means of preparation for that demographic. Maximal strength work, that will be specific to weightlifting and to powerlifting, but it might not be specific to a sport like cycling, for example. Okay, so there's that way of using the term specificity. And then there's another element, what we call the specificity principle. So it's, in my opinion, one of the cornerstones of sports preparation. And we cannot plan, understand, analyze training intelligently if we don't have a complete understanding of the specificity principle. And a lot of people nowadays, I find, seem to think that the likeness version of specificity is what matters. Meaning, if an activity looks like your sport, then it's going to be specific, and that's going to be something positive. However, if it is not specific, then we don't want to do it because it's a waste of time. And I think that is a huge mistake in sports preparation. So back to the principle itself, there's another way to call it. We can call it the SAID principle, SAID, that stands for specific adaptations to imposed demands, meaning simply that the adaptations that you get as a result from training are going to be specific to the stimulus that is used or applied. And if we understand the specificity principle under that lens, then we are better equipped to answer the question, is zone 2 specific to your sport? Because obviously, if we only look at the modality of training with zone 2 and the duration and the intensity, well, it's not going to be specific to many sports beside long distance endurance sports like cycling, like trail running, maybe triathlon, long distance ones. Obviously, that zone 2 now becomes specific if we compare it to what is going to be required in those sports. And zone 2 training, as low intensity continuous training, is not going to be specific in that context to CrossFit, to MMA, to powerlifting, to bodybuilding, or even to team sports in general. But if we switch our perspective from the specificity, which is the likeness to the activity, and the specificity principle, the SAID principle, at that point, now we can see how zone 2 is actually going to be interesting, not because it looks like or feels like the activity itself, but because the adaptations that will result from this training are going to help every single activity that you do. It's that simple. And I'll give you a little rundown of what I see as the most important and beneficial adaptations from this low intensity continuous work, regardless of what sport you practice. So we can start from the top, start from the central nervous system, and we see that with low intensity activities, there seems to be an increase in the parasympathetic drive, in the parasympathetic tone. And it's interesting because it's not necessarily an on-off switch when it comes to the autonomic nervous system. So if we think of the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight kind of system side of things, and the parasympathetic, which is usually qualified as rest, digest, and socialize, I think is the triad that we need to use for parasympathetic. And it's not an on-off situation, because your sympathetic nervous system is always active. it's actually dampened in a way by what we call the vagal brake, the parasympathetic brake. And what happens is, as you increase intensity, that vagal brake kind of dissipates or lifts and allows your sympathetic tone and drive to express itself, increase heart rate, increase stress hormones in the body, and allows you to execute something at high intensity, for example, or run from a lion in a survival context. So low intensity training, higher parasympathetic drive, and for some athletes that do a lot of high intensity, a lot of hard stuff all the time, that low intensity can really help on the nervous system side of things. I've seen improved sleep patterns. I've seen improved recovery after 2 or 3 weeks of including that type of work. So obviously those are not adaptations that happen at the muscle level, at the heart level, because those things take weeks, months, and years to develop. But the nervous system seems to be the side that we can affect the quickest. So that's just one element. Then obviously we have the heart, like I just said. We're gonna have a bigger heart. A bigger heart can pump more blood and can contract harder as well. And that's gonna be beneficial regardless of what type of sport you practice. The vascular side is going to be improved. Think of going from a 2-way highway to a 4-lane highway. Much more interesting when we talk about transport capacity. What are we transporting? Nutrients, oxygen to the muscles. And so the more lanes you have on your highway, the more oxygen you can transport. And together with that comes the transporters. So the hemoglobin mass or blood volume, both of those things will be improved with low intensity training, especially if you've never done it before, because it's going to raise that blood volume. Essentially, the more blood you use on the longer period of time, your body adapts by giving you more blood to do the work. It's a little simplified, but it serves the purpose. We're going to have an improvement on the vascular side, like I just said, also at the capillary level. So this is where the oxygen transfers from the blood into the muscle fibers, into the muscles themselves. It's like the parking spots at the airport for the taxis that are bringing their passengers. Here, the taxis are hemoglobin in your red blood cells. Passengers are oxygen molecules. And so if you have more taxi parking spots at the airport, you can drop off more passengers, you can drop off more oxygen inside your muscles. That's going to help you no matter what type of sport you do. And then we also have obviously the improved in mitochondrial capacity inside the muscle fibers. That is a result of low intensity continuous training, or zone 2 training, as some call it. And on that, you can think of the check-in counters at the airport. The more check-in counters you have, the more people you can get through in a given amount of time. The more mitochondria you have, the more oxygen you can use, and the higher pace or intensity you can maintain as an output while maintaining a balanced metabolic state, right? The more oxygen you can use, the steadier you can stay at higher powers, higher speeds. All of those adaptations are going to have a positive effect on the body, right? I didn't even talk about the endocrine side of things, which will be impacted positively as well. We see that for people coming back from injuries, people suffering from chronic pain, all those things can be improved as well by that continuous low intensity training. And that's going to help no matter what your sport is. So I think we need to redirect that specificity conversation and try to really focus on the adaptations and understand the adaptations so that we can better think about what training is going to help. And I definitely think that zone 2 is going to be interesting for your sport, even though it's not specific from a modality, intensity, or duration standpoint. But for all the reasons that I just cited, you have to consider it as part of your training regimen. Obviously, beginners might benefit less from it. More advanced athletes or people that train a lot or have trained in their sport a lot for multiple years, they're usually going to benefit more from it, simply because the best training is the one you've never done. The best stimulus is the one you've never had. So if you've done your sport for many years but haven't done anything beside it, well, adding zone 2 is probably going to help. However, if you're just starting out and you just started playing a new sport or practicing something like CrossFit, well, there's a chance that you'll be able to train hard in your sport for a few years before you actually need to add anything different to it, because the sport itself is already new to you, so it's different enough at that stage. I hope that video made sense to you. I look forward to reading your comments and seeing what other topics I can tackle on the channel. Thanks for your support. I'll see you in the next one.